The world of all-inclusive is so complicated because there's a million ways to do it and everybody thinks that their way is the best way. So I always recommend when a venue says, we want to build an all-inclusive, I'm like, let's start small. Let's do bar, food, and maybe cake. Let's start with just one small and get into the rhythm of how is that working? What's the contracting look like? What's deposits look like? Let's start as small as we can, and rather than sitting down and building a huge all-inclusive.
We document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
All right, Shannon Tarrant, welcome to the Venue RX podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I am so excited to be here. Long-time listener, first-time visitor.
Awesome. I love the radio, the call to radio back in the day. Very cool. Very cool. Shannon, this is an episode that I've been looking forward to. I know you scheduled it a couple of times. You are you're vocal. People know you in the wedding space. You've done so much. You've spoken on a lot of different stages, and I know we're going to get into some of that today. But I wanted to just jump in with a little bit of a professional background on you, and take me back to pre-wedding industry Shannon, if there ever was such a thing.
I went to school for hospitality and really spent a lot of time in the food and beverage space in restaurants. And the long story short is the restaurants got slow I'm in Central Florida in between holiday time, and I was complaining about it. And one of my friends, her husband owned a catering company and said, well, maybe you could go do events with them over there. And I said, serving and bartending is serving and bartending. So I'll try it out. And that really kind of launched my career outside of traditional restaurant food and beverage into event catering, and then catering led to venue, and then venue led to no more. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I really kind of started my event industry career in offsite catering, which was a really fun opportunity because as an offsite caterer, you get to go to all the venues and private homes. And so that's kind of where my first passion and love for the venue came into play.
We have a similar, I think, entry point. I started with a background in hospitality and, serving, bartending, all the different things, but then went to staffing. So we staffed at all the different, and so it was similar. We were kind of mirroring that offsite experience that you had. And it is cool. You get to be in the belly of the beast oftentimes, right? For all these really cool venues. And so tell me then, share about the shift from that to Wedding Venue Map. How did Wedding Venue Map come about, and where are you at now?
So the catering company that I worked for at the time started managing a few venues that came kind of up for bid. And so I did that for a little while and made a shift over to a family-owned resort and hotel. I kind of was ready to go from venue that was tables, chairs, catering to having those extra pieces of hotel and amenities and resort. And I spent about 10 years in between the two of them. And the terrible long story short is I just got sick of couples and moms. And we were a high volume venue. We did 150 weddings a year. And my role there was heavily sales and marketing. And I like things that are challenging and broken and need to be fixed. And we had built it into such an amazing wedding machine that the couples never felt it, but I was on rinse, wash, repeat, and I just was really bored and wanted to find a way to take all of the passions I had within the wedding industry and working maybe not as hands-on with couples, but being able to take that marketing knowledge and venue knowledge and build and create something that would be the bridge in between couples planning their wedding and our local venues here in Central Florida.
Got it. So, and that is kind of, I guess, where the venue map comes in, right? So, anyone who's not aware of what that is, could you share a little bit?
Yeah. So it was an interesting shift in time when the national directories had decided that if you were a wedding venue, you had to pay to be listed. So they kind of went through a shift where they removed all of the free listings and the basic listings off of the site. The challenge was for the couples planning a wedding in every market, but especially in our market, they weren't finding some of the venues that were awesome, maybe more affordable, because they didn't have huge marketing budgets. And So we decided to build a local venue search engine, both with a print actual map showcasing all of the venues in our market, as well as an online version where they could not only see all the venues, both paid and free listings, but also be able to sort by 50 different criteria. So it was a shift in concept. Instead of quantity of leads, it was letting today's couple really narrow down to say, I have 200 people. I want a barn that allows outside catering where I can bring my dog. It's pet friendly. And it will sort that list of the 500 venues down to maybe the 10 that specifically meet their criteria. And that's what Wedding Venue Map is.
Wow. Is that just for the Central Florida area?
Yeah, we're only in Central Florida. It's been such an awesome growth of our members and our local community, and maybe someday we'll grow outside of, but I love the community that we have here and what we've built here. And every single time I speak on something like this or stage, people are like, how do I get this in my market? Like, we need this. I say, I know, like, but we're happy with what works for us right now.
Totally. Yeah, no, I hearing you describe it like that is like, this needs to definitely be in every market for sure. And I know you've heard that before, right? But it's like that localized finding of like, if you live in an area and you're willing to travel an hour or 2 hours, like and there's certainly some good resources with the existing national directories.
Of course, absolutely.
But I think, to your point, I think there's room for more and room for maybe more specifics.
Yeah. And as the venue owner, right, you don't really want to talk to that bride that has a $2,000 budget for a venue. She probably doesn't fit. She's not your ideal client. But until that couple can find the options that do work within their budget, and there are things, there's locally, there's city-owned venues, maybe your community centers or church halls, but they can't find those because those places don't have the marketing budget. So it's been really cool to be able to still have great active conversations with couples planning their wedding and be able to be that bridge in between, gathering local data and just hearing the words they use. We do 25 wedding shows a year, and we talk to them. And like our running joke last year was the word woodsy. Was when I said, what are you looking for in a venue? They kept on saying something woodsy, like we're in Florida. Woodsy is not our market. Like, we don't have forests and hills and mountains, but we immediately got home from that show. And after 10 people said that word, we added it as a search. We looked for the venues that maybe, would fall into woodsy. And so it's great to be able to be the bridge in between the two.
Fair. I'm curious, as you have gotten this massive exposure, right? Your career's gone along. Now you've got this massive exposure to venues. Even not, ones that you're consulting with, but like clients of the Wedding Venue Map, right?
Yeah.
Are you able to kind of pick up at a macro sense some trends in like the search terms or some of the things that people are searching for? And then, I know this is maybe more relevant to Central Florida because of the location that you're in, but like, are you seeing things year over year that have changed substantially since the pandemic, for example, or not as much?
Absolutely. I think that in those conversations, not only with the couples, but also with the venues, we tend to be that landing pad when our venues are, we don't really have a lot of leads coming in, what's going on? And we can kind of be like, everybody's saying the same thing, take a breath, or it's summer. And we can kind of start to see the trends year over year. I said it at the start of last summer that I kept hearing all summer that like they weren't really touring venues, they weren't making decisions. And I said, I think this next generation travels over the summer in a way that 10 years ago, the couples didn't really go all in international every summer for like weeks at a time. And I said, I think this is going to start happening every summer. And it's lo and behold, the conversations have started again that the number of tours are down, the pieces are down. And so, yeah, it's not only hearing that from the venue side, but also, like you mentioned, when the couples will say, no, we found our venue on social media, I'll be like, what platform? How are you searching? Open your phone and show me, so that they'll show me the keywords that they searched and the word maybe I would have thought, or even that Google is saying is the number one search term aren't the terms they would use on Instagram or on TikTok. And so yeah, it's cool to be able to just learn that information and be able to share it and really push our venues to be a little bit more progressive with actual data, not just, we're supposed to be on TikTok. And we're like, well, yeah, cool. But am I going to get leads from the platform? So learning it from that perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of like Pinterest. Like I can have gorgeous photos and just be pinning all day. Is it driving dollars? Like, is that, I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a question that, I mean, if it's not an impossible question, you hold the keys to this whole industry, but give me your best shot at this. Give me what you feel like is the closest to a silver bullet in terms of marketing. I know there's no such thing, but like in terms of marketing, if people are like, I can only do 2 things or 3 things out of all the things that you've seen venues do, are there a top 2 or 3 things for you that really move the needle for the venues that you've talked to?
Yeah, I think for venue, SEO would be my number one, is that no matter where they land and what they're searching, and not general keyword SEO, really deep specific, and building those landing pages inside of it. So thinking if you're a waterfront wedding venue, let's use that as like a search term. Instead of our whole market is killing each other to rank for Orlando wedding venue. But we know that the not Wedding Wire directories, they're always going to beat you out, right? Because you have no chance to outrank a directory. You just don't for the big city keywords. But you can outrank them for things like waterfront. Because while, yes, they do keyword some of those things, you can rank really high. So building either landing pages or really getting keyword specific. While we all know that SEO is like a long game in terms of doing the work and it getting there, I think that it would be it's the most important place. If you don't come up and you don't rank and you don't have to be in the top spot, but if you don't come up at all, I feel like for venue, they'll go back a few pages and they'll keep scrolling a little bit. But if you're on page like 10, you have no chance. So SEO would be my number one.
That makes so much sense. It's interesting. You said about scrolling. I think most of us are not used to scrolling past the second page. Unless we're finding, right, like our attention spans are pretty short. If you're not on the first and second page, are you getting to the third page? But to your point, especially if the first half of the first page is sponsored posts, directories. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of biased. Like when I see sponsored, I'm like, oh, I know they paid. Like, let me go find where the real ones are, I guess.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because sometimes, I don't know about in your market, but sometimes we'll search keywords and the sponsored posts that come up, I who know the venues, I'm like, that doesn't even match that. So they're paying for keywords specific to land there, but I'm like, they don't even have waterfront. Like they're ranking for it, like, because it's a sponsored ad. So I do think when it comes to venue that they will search deeper and more in that world.
Yeah. Agreed. And also they're searching in volume, like in more places. Like just because you look at one place, they're kind of looking, okay, that place, what does their website look like? What does their Instagram look like? Oh, that's funny. I saw them on TikTok. Oh, that's interesting. I saw a post on Google My Business, whatever. That's awesome. Okay, cool. That was super helpful. So today I really want to talk about vendors, right? And we talked about this a little bit before we hopped on, but I've had this question in my mind. I think as venue owners, venue operators go through the life cycle of their professional career, they go from saying, oh my gosh, let's open a venue. All of the pieces are complicated, so let's just do blank canvas. Let's do tables and chairs. We'll get Honeybook or, Dubsado or whatever our CRM system is, 17 hats, whatever, right? And then they'll say, okay, we've got that down. We've got this down. Some basic tables and chairs, great. And then in year 2 or 3, they're like, okay, what's next?
Where do I find more money?
Where do I find
money? Where's the money?
So then they start thinking about adding on, because before when they were, preferred lists and things like that, now they're thinking of maybe adding on planning, DJ, like some of these things that they can give into a package. Can you kick off this conversation? This is what I want to spend a little time on. Can you kick off this conversation with what's your take on a sample kind of life cycle of that journey of, and what are the easiest things to add first, kind of the low-hanging fruit to going all-inclusive, and then how should someone, and I know it's different for everyone, but like what's a sample of how the journey could go?
This is like my favorite topic right now because with what I do for a living, we have 500 venues in Central Florida, and I'm really spoiled because not only do I get to talk to the privately owned barn and, people who build a ballroom and things like that, I work with city-owned venues, hotels, and they're really, even though there's a life cycle, I think the life cycle depends on privately owned versus corporate or city, right? So we're going to focus today on privately owned because I think that's a little bit, you don't have the flexibility, the work that goes into subbing out vendors. Corporations don't really like to put their name on people and usually do things like that. I toured a venue on Monday. This amazing couple, they're in their mid-60s. This is like their retirement plan. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, what did you do? You built a $2 million, no experience. You have no idea what you're doing. And my first question on a tour is, what's your rule for vendors? And she's like, well, they can do whatever. They just have to hire a bartender. And that is where almost every venue starts. They choose with whatever's included, which is tables, chairs. She did linens, and I think I talked her out of it. I was like, no venue wants to do linen. Get that out of there. Like, get it off the list, right? But tables, chairs, venue. And most of the time they're like, I want to be hands off. Yeah. I want to just rent my space. They'll come in, do what they want. And I don't want to be responsible for alcohol liability. So we'll require a bartender. So I think that that's where, from a venue standpoint, if you're opening up and you have no experience and don't know anyone, the only category you have to make sure you have someone in is alcohol. Like, you need to kind of check that box. But like you mentioned, whether the shift comes from wanting more revenue, I also think there's a shift in terms of ease of flow. And so when you start to realize that allowing them to bring in their own food, but the mess, there's no cleanup, there's no service staff, there's no servers, and you start to like learn, oh, this is more work for me to have to do. So I think the next, whether you do it in-house or you make it required, I think catering is probably the easiest, the most important place to actually start. I think it's food, because the food and beverage and servers and things that come along with that, the trash, the cleanup, the having a lot of extra hands that are kind of a part of your team, whether you bring it in-house or you develop really strong partnerships where it's like only 3 or only 5, but they know the rules, know the repetition. I usually tell venues to start with catering.
So I'm curious about this because catering is also, and from what I've heard and understand just from my own experience, the second, in most cases, biggest expense when it comes to the overall wedding.
Yeah.
Venue may command 30 to 40% of the budget, depending on the venue you have.
Yeah.
And then catering is going to come in and be what, 20%, something-ish in that range?
Yeah, maybe. Yep.
F&B, when you add that in, like depending on where you're at. So by doing that, do you kind of lock yourself into a specific client price point? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you may only be able, but before you might be able to deal with it.
I suggest that if you're going to do a list, making sure that you will round the list. So whether you do, my recommendation is usually 3 to 5. It's never 1, which the caterers hate me when I say it. Like, exclusivity, I think, is a terrible idea because you put all your eggs in that one basket. But I think it's 3.
And can I just interrupt you really quick? Shannon, could you help me explain why exclusivity in vendors is a terrible idea?
Yeah, because I think that couples want choices, even though they love the thought of showing up at a venue and having everything provided inside of it. They're not, when you're an offsite venue, they don't think of you like a hotel. So they walk up and are like, I want the ease, but I still want to pick. And so if you go exclusive, especially with food and beverage, right? I'm going to use barns in my world because we have like 70 of them. You're going to get that barn couple that'll spend $10,000 for your barn, but they don't care about the food and they want a really good barbecue that's like $30 a person and is in there, versus the couple who wants the action stations and all of those pieces and wants to spend $80 a person. So it's hard to do that and build an all-inclusive. I'm just talking about more having like that required and building those relationships. And my and this doesn't work in every market. So let me just But in our market, if you require them to use a choice of 5 or a choice of 3, those catering companies pay 10% food and beverage back to the venue. Because that's like the marketing cost of them doing, but not staffing, not tax, not service charges, not that stuff. But they pay a 10% like referral fee because they're required to use one of 5. So they know that at your venue, they have a 20% chance of winning the client. So I think when you look at it that way, I think the challenge with exclusivity is you can go exclusive if you've been open long enough and you really know your client. But if that vendor that you choose to go exclusive with doesn't, like, let's use DJ as a bad example. If they can't do bilingual, Caribbean, have multiple people, have every upsell that they could possibly want, it's really hard for you to say, here's the only DJ you can use. And they're like, well, I want Cold Sparks. And they're like, they don't have it. Or I want, we need somebody who, speaks Spanish. And they're like, well, we don't have. So, you might lose the business of them booking your venue because of the vendor choices that you've made.
That makes so much sense. And I think that's a trap that venue owners need to be careful of 100%. Yeah, because it feels like a good choice. There's ease for the owner on just knowing your team, knowing the person that's going to show up, but at the same time, you're really closing yourself off to those other options. So you said your magic number for venues or for vendors, if you're going to have a list, is 3 to 5, somewhere in that range?
3 to 5, no more than 5. It gets too confusing unless you're picking like the best of your market. So we worked with one of our local venues to build their all-inclusive, and she chose like the best DJs in our market to put in the package, which was great, but availability became a problem. So whereas, a larger catering company or a larger DJ company that has a team of 6 or 7 or 10, a multi-op, might have more than enough people to send out. But if they're a single operator and there's one DJ, when he's booked, now you went and booked the date and he's not available, what are you going to do? So sometimes it's like this magic put together of figuring out the who, that like you don't want to have only singles. You want to have people. You don't want to have, the really small private chef caterer who can only do one event a day. Because if they're booked or if they get a bigger piece of business, sometimes they're like, sorry guys, we got to go take the bigger piece. So I would say like 3 to 5, whether it's all inclusive or even referred. And my brain always goes to budget. I want somebody on the lower cost wise. I want somebody in the middle. And I want somebody who's like best of the best so that we can cover the range of, if the bride doesn't care about the DJ, you got to find somebody who's more budget friendly versus the best of the best because they're not going to invest their dollars there.
Shannon, I want to break that down a little bit more because I heard you say in there might be already booked for an event and then you go and book the event. So if this is for in that scenario that you just mentioned, it's where the venue is offering an all-inclusive full package and you've put that person or those two people on your list and they're both booked for that day. Totally. So for anyone who's not familiar with that way of doing inclusive venues, because there might be people listening and think inclusive is like a hotel. What's that hybrid inclusive way that you can kind of get in and provide that experience for your clients without actually hiring a W-2 chef?
Yeah, the world of all inclusive is so complicated because there's a million ways to do it. And everybody thinks that their way is the best way in terms of, so you do have that opportunity, like you kind of touched on, to just hire people. We have a great venue in town that she has hybrid. She hired the florist and hired the planner, but they, partner with instead catering, DJ, and other things. So I always recommend when a venue says, we want to build an all-inclusive, I'm like, let's start small. Let's do bar, food, and maybe cake. Let's start with just one small and get into the rhythm of how is that working? What's the contracting look like? What's deposits look like? Let's start as small as we can and rather than sitting down and building a huge all-inclusive. Because today's couple, we did a survey in January, they don't know what all-inclusive means. We asked them and surveyed, when you hear that it's an all-inclusive venue, what do you expect to be included? And it was everything from dress and hair and makeup, which no venue includes, to venue tables, chairs, and food. So I think when you start to look at today's couple planning a wedding, is they're tired, they're busy, they work a lot, and the less friction that you can put in part of the planning process. So if you're good at sales and relationship building and marketing, and by the time they get to you, they're like, damn, I love this place, I love these people, but I just booked the venue and now I have to go meet with catering and DJ and flower, and I have to do all this other stuff. When you can remove that friction and say, hey, we have the venue-only package, but we also have an all-inclusive package that includes catering, bar, DJ, cake, even just 2 or 3 or 4. And then you still can go out and choose your own florist and choose your own photographer and all of those things. But we've kind of narrowed down to the best in our market. And that package is, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 for 100 people, and it includes that. You would be shocked how many of them are like, yes. Yes, I want that. Totally. Yes. Because you just checked 4 or 5 boxes for me to make my life easier.
Can you help unpack that for venue owners who are listening, watching right now on YouTube, and they're like, wait, we got to do that. I'm sold. Shannon, let's make this happen. So how I'm going and let's say I'm looking at my list and I'm like, okay, I've got a couple of catering companies. I got a taco person, I got a mid-range, and I've got something a little higher end. They've got the 3 to 5 vendors, like you said. They've already had that list.
Yeah.
How do you go about, what's the next step to go about creating that package and reaching out to those vendors?
Well, you're spoiled, Jonathan, because I'm going to start giving you secret sauce. This stuff is secret sauce, right? So here's the problem with that whole philosophy I have in terms of referring 3 different levels. That doesn't work for an all-inclusive.
Yeah.
Because you more or less need to be able to have a sellable package that everybody kind of works within a similar price point. So what that means, I'm going to take catering off the table because catering is the most complicated. Let's do DJ because it's pretty easy, right? You sit down as the venue and you know what your venue needs from a DJ. You know that you need a ceremony setup outside over here, a cocktail setup over there. We need reception for 4 hours because that's what we allow here. I need 15 up lights in the room. I want a cake spot. You decide this is what I want the DJ portion package to be. And then you reach out to your preferred vendors and you say, hey, listen, we're looking to build this package. We're going to do all the marketing. They're going to book it through us. And then once they sign with us, we're going to check your availability and say, here's the 3 DJs you've got to pick from. So I'm going to hand deliver you leads that are already booked. You just have to convince them to choose you. And so what is the best price that you're willing to give me for this exact package? And this requires a complicated spreadsheet, but you'll build it. So then you reach out to, and I don't say reach out to the 3, reach out to 10. Just go big. People on your list, people you like that you've worked with, but maybe aren't on your list, go big. Collect all of them. And then what you're looking for is that middle point average. You're looking for so most of them came in between 1,400 and 1,600. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to put it in there at 1,500. I'm going to reach out to anybody that was above that we love and tell them, hey guys, 1,500 is what we're willing to pay. So if you're willing to do it for that, we'd love to have you in there. If you're not, you're out, not doing it. And then you kind of can see anybody even underneath that, that falls in. So you're more or less kind of gathering the quotes to sit down and decide through where's the price point of what we're going to have to build into that package. And if you're a genius, you mark it up. Mm-hmm. So you take that $1,500 and you build it into your package at $1,700 or $1,750, because when it's a part of a big package, the couples, most of them, not all, but most of them are not going to ask you to line item it out.
Yeah.
They don't ask. They're not like, well, how much is this and how much is that? And those that do, I'm like, you probably shouldn't go with an all-inclusive.
You want more of a blank canvas. Totally.
Yeah. If you want to build and know every single nickel, dime, penny, you should just book the venue and go hunt.
Yeah. So then I want to say it back to you to make sure I got it, and just so we recap for the audience. And this is going to be one of those like most watched episodes for sure, because you're giving away the good stuff. Like you just
This is the good stuff.
you know? So you go on your list, you got your 10 people that you reached out to, but previously you've decided you're going to create a $25,000 wedding package, let's say.
Yeah.
Right? Boom.
You got to find a sweet spot number, right? Yeah.
And so, and let's use maybe 20 for easy numbers, right? So you're like, okay, 20. I'm going to do my $1,500 package. I found 3 DJs who are willing to supply me with that service at $1,500.
Yeah.
But so you haven't confirmed any of them, but you're like, hey, I'm going with 3 of you, and so how do you do that? Like, let's say you get a wedding date booked and they're like, we want your package. Do you go to all 3? Do you go to 1? Like, how do you do that?
So my recommendation is the first thing you want to check is availability. And this is a step that I think venues skip often, and our venues locally skip it. And I think it's a fail. Most venues that do an all-inclusive with choices will just hand the couple the list and let them reach out. The problem is they're researching and they might fall in love with one, and then that one is not available. So what I suggest is the couple contracts and pays. You send one BCC e-blast out to everybody in the package and say, Susie and Mike have just booked for this date. As of today, are you available? Obviously, you could book it tomorrow, but as of I need an answer by Friday if you're still available. And then at that point, you can hand the couple all of the companies in the list and be like, today, these are who's available for your current date. But if you wait 6 months to start making choices on some of these, they might not be open anymore. So let's start moving, start researching, call them, do whatever you got to do. And what we are finding is that couples aren't even talking to them, meaning they are looking at social media, websites, reading reviews, going back to the venue and being like, I want DJ 1. They're not even doing appointments because they know the venue have already vetted great people. So they're just kind of utilizing their online presence. So as you're vetting vendors to put in your package, that's also really important. So if you have a DJ that you absolutely love, but he doesn't have Instagram, God, it's 2023. Let's go, people. But he doesn't have an Instagram, he's probably not going to be the guy who gets picked in the package. So use that as part of your vetting process. How good are their websites? How active are they on social? And do they have enough reviews? Because if the couples are choosing in between them, that's the things that they're looking at.
So the couples are choosing in that thing.
The couples are choosing. That's my recommendation. I feel like when venues just choose and assign DJ 1, DJ 2, DJ 3, this is where you get into the danger zone of that person dropping a ball or incorrectly not meeting an expectation. And then the couples put it on you, the venue, being like, well, you chose my DJ. Whereas, a lot of times the pushback I hear about all-inclusive is, well, I don't want to put my name on their business. Well, if you give the couples the choice, it's their fault. You might have recommended them, but they chose them.
Got it. So you're like DJ X and DJ Y. Great. These are our 2 DJs. They're going to go online. They're going to check out DJ X, check out DJ Y. They're not reaching out to them, but they're just like, hey,
They might, but most likely not.
Yeah, because it's the all-inclusive. They're going to go back to you and say, hey, we chose DJ Y. If DJ Y has a sick Instagram, if he's got some cool stuff on TikTok, whatever it is, now all of a sudden DJ. So in terms of, so then they tell you, hey, we're going to go with DJ Y. And then you go as the venue and say, hey, DJ Y, you got booked for October 23rd, whatever it is. Got it.
Yeah. So my best recommendation is always the venues having a year-long contract with each vendor that's kind of their standard contract of what's included. This is what we're always going to do. This is how it's always going to look. This is what the timeline will look like, whatever. And then in between, instead of doing individual contracts for every single wedding with every single vendor, doing what we call like a booking form, where the venue sends over here's their date, here's their email, anything that vendor needs to put into their CRM or to load in to block and reserve the date. Because technically the venue is the one contracting the vendor, not the couple.
Yeah, I was going to say the venue is hiring them.
Yeah, when venues are like, well, we make the couple sign the contract with the vendors, I'm like, you're not saving them any effort. That's too much work. That's not an all-inclusive.
Yeah.
Like all-inclusive is one-stop shopping.
And that's such a good clarification, because I think some venues go, hey, we're going all-inclusive, but then they're like, here's 7 forms you need to sign. We just assembled them for you. And it's like, that doesn't act like, that's not.
Or they're like, they have to pay the vendors themselves. I'm like, this is dumb. That doesn't solve me any problems.
Fair.
Like, You didn't save me the time.
So the practical, very just pragmatically, they write a $25,000 check or whatever it is, $5,000 deposit to you, the venue, and then you're going and booking DJ X, DJ Y, you're going and booking, Sally's Cakes. And so you do this with planners as well?
Yes, you can either hire in-house, but we did this. If you don't want to hire a planner, and same thing, you want choices. So the hotel I worked at, we had two, we called them catering managers, but they more or less were wedding catchers. I sold, they caught, and they executed on event day. But we had two very different personalities. One young, cute, sweet, nice. You want to be your best friend. The other one was in her 40s, mature life experience. It was amazing because then when I booked a client, I could be like, ooh, that's a Katie, that's a Stephanie. But if you hire a planner and you have one planner, what if they don't personality match with that client? So if you don't want to hire the planner, and you can do the same thing when it comes to planners and having choices where here's the 4 or 5, it's a month of or whatever package, it's included, and here's how we do it. It's really the hardest part of this is the logistics setup. Once it's set up, it just rolls.
Totally. And I think that's what venues are scared of.
Of course.
And where there's not education, I mean, honestly, Shannon, I've never heard anyone break it down like you just broke it down here on the podcast. So that's massive for people. And I wasn't kidding about the most watched, most viewed. I'm really hoping people, because that is the next evolution of our industry. It's going from blank canvas to doing some sort of package, even if you're not going to exclusively do the packages, right? But it makes sense. So let's go down the list. You said initially you take just a couple off your list. You're taking planners, you're taking cakes, you're taking catering.
Planner, cake, food, and beverage are your easiest in terms of, because I think having a planner be a part of it is really important because it lightens the load of that last 60 days for the venue. So for venues that don't want to hire a lot of staff and they don't have a lot of staff, having strong planning partners, that's a must. Put that one in.
What about catering in terms of the different options? Because oftentimes with catering, there are tastings and even with bar packages, if you have a winery and you're going to do a winery tasting where they're going to, decide which wines they want at their wedding or things like that. Where do you have some best practices around how to work with caterers?
So usually more or less caterers and food and beverage kind of tie together. So whether you do it either way, you more or less do the same thing. You pick the package. You say it has to be 3 butler passed hors d'oeuvres. I need a buffet with a salad, 2 protein entrees, starch, vegetable, bread, X amount of servers for 100 people, whatever. Give me a price point and show me what the menu choices would be for that price point. And then you kind of gather those few quotes and then you're looking at them and you can kind of decide. I mean, this is dirty dog for the vendors, but who cares? We're helping the venues today, right? You can so let's say caterer A is $40 a person, caterer B is $52 a person, and caterer C is $55 a person. You can build it in at $55 a person. And if they pick caterer A, you win as a venue because you just paid another $20 per person for free because they don't know that they picked somebody that you're paying out a lesser dollar amount. But one of the other options that I've seen is that, and in general, all vendors should be responsible for their own upsells. Let me say that one more time. So if you have a caterer and it's a buffet and the couple's well, we're interested in adding on a carving station. When you meet with your caterer, you're going to get the pricing from them. You're going to pay them for upgrades, upsells, anything. They are responsible for those things. You're just our bar is 3 beers, 2 reds, 2 whites. Here's the base bar package. If they're well, we want to upgrade that to a top tier bar, don't get in the middle of that stuff. It's too much back and forth for you to be the point person. Let the vendor make the money. If you've marked it up to a point where you're happy, get out of the middle and let them sell, because then it's more emails for you. You got to go back and forth and back. And then the couples get smart because they realize you've started to mark it up.
I was just going to ask.
Because what happens is on the front side, they don't really think you've marked it up. They're like, this is a great deal. I'm getting all of this for $25,000. This is awesome. But if you become the middleman for upsells and it all starts to pass through you, they start to be like, well, why can't if the caterer says, oh, you want to add a carving station? Well, we'll let the venue know. And then they're like, why can't you just tell me how much it freaking is?
Yeah.
That transparency goes away. So I think as long as you're making the money you want to make off the package, you're getting your fee, you've got the little extras built in there, then you can go ahead and just let the vendors do their thing, get out of the middle of it. Because unless you are a venue with a lot of staff and a lot of bodies and a lot of hands, by all means. But I don't know. I suggest staying out and let them sell their stuff.
Yeah. How do you protect from vendors sharing kind of the typical pricing? Or like, for example, if a vendor says to XYZ couple, John and Jane, and they're like, and you just said, remember you had your packages 25 and you said 52 and 55, whatever it was. Yeah. Now you're like, they pick the $25 one, but you've priced it the $50. They go back and they're like, well, our packages normally start at $50 a person, or whatever they say, right?
Yeah.
Vendor. And then they're trying to upsell them. They're adding the carving station or whatever else.
Right.
Then the client will be like, wait, like $25 a person? I'm paying 50 at the venue.
Right.
How do you avoid a situation like that happening?
Okay, let me do a different category other than catering, and then I'll come back to catering.
Fair.
In the other categories, the name of the game is the markup. So when you ask for the quotes, I should have said this before, you're asking for the retail price and the best price they're giving you. So if you know that in general, the retail price, if a client was to cold call them and just get a quote for your venue, that retail price is $1,750 and they're giving it to you for $1,500, you cannot build it into your package any higher than $1,750. Don't be an a-hole and mark it up to $2,000 because you will bite yourself. So you want to know what the discount is to do that. On the food and beverage side, if you're going to play the game I just said where the price points are pretty drastic in between, what you can do is take that $32 caterer and have their menu include a bunch of extra bonuses to get to the 50. So meaning caterer A, who's only 32 and you've built it in at 50, caterer A's buffet might include a carving station, an extra display at cocktail. Their menu might include more at that same price point. So it's like, well, that's why, like, yes, in general, their retail is lower, but the package includes more than this guy who's only at 50. So that's a workaround that you can get around. But I promise you, you will be booking so much business for these people. They will shut up and fall in line because they want to be the one you're sending it to. And the minute they run their mouth, they're out. You pull them out. Yeah. Like they're out of the package. Have a good day.
Fair. And you can probably share them because they, at the end of the day, as the venue, you are kind of the coordinator. You're the tip of the spear. You're putting together, you're doing the marketing for them, right?
Doing it anyways. You might as well start making money off of it. That's how I felt.
Exactly. And that's so true. I mean, when I'm touring at any of the properties that we manage, I have caterers that I am just passing business off to because I enjoy working with them or whatever. And that's
they take good care of your clients for sure.
Yeah. Totally. But the next stage really is like including in more of a formalized package to make it easier on the couples, and that has value and you can charge for that value.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, my best example when people tell me this doesn't work and it won't work and it won't work in my market, I've now done it in 3 markets across the country. But the first I did it at was the hotel I used to work at. And I called the owner, the general manager, and I said, listen, if one more couple at a wedding show looks at our giant map of 500 venues and says, how many have all-inclusive? And you know what my answer is? 11. 11 out of 500 offer that option. It's a search on our website. It gets clicked every day. People are looking for it, and it sorts down to 11. We only had 11. And he said, no one will do it here because our food, beverage, and venue, because it's a hotel, that package for 100 people right now is $20,000. And I said, okay, so why don't we make it $35,000 and include all the stuff and try? And so the first step I suggested was on the tours that they were already doing. I wanted the salesperson who told me she'll never do this, changed her mind. I asked her to start asking the couples, hey, we're thinking about building a package that includes more than just the venue, like the food, the beverage, some of the vendors. Is this something you'd be interested in? That's step 1. Immediately, the couples were like, yes, do you have it? Yes, how much is it? Yeah. And she was like, oh God, like, Shannon might be right. And then I walked them through all this. I mean, it took us 90 days. Yeah. It took us to do all the paperwork, the contracts, figure it all out. How are we going to do it? System it out. It took us 3 to 4 months to do. The package came in just under $35,000. They now book 95% all inclusive at a hotel at $35,000 for 100 people.
Wow.
Because the couples there to walk in and be like, God, it's $20,000 for food and beverage. I'm not going to have enough money to do everything else. And then they start talking to, let's say, photographers, and they find somebody they love on Instagram, and that photographer's $5,000. Well, the ones in the package are only $2,800. Or they find a DJ, and they add all the bells and whistles and get a quote back, and that's $3,000. Now they're like, I can't afford this venue, and the venue was losing the business to a privately owned with outside catering where they could bring in their own alcohol. But now it became, well, listen, I get it. You can either book just the venue, food and beverage for $20,000, or you can book the whole shebang. And we added in crazy things like sparkler exit included, like champagne in your hotel room. We added all this extra stuff that had really no cost. We added a ready room concierge. It's an intern. She is literally sits in their space with a cell phone so they can text her 24/7 for anything. We need waters. We need this. We need that. She was already there that day. We just added it and it's only for the all-inclusive. They only get that butler or whatever for the all-inclusive.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
yeah, the concierge was like, oh my God, look at that. She doesn't do anything all day. Every now and then she grabs a safety pin. Like, she don't work that hard, but it's added value in that way. And the amount of, and so at the end of the first year at that hotel, the GM called me and was like, so how much of a bonus do I have to give you? I'm like, how much money did you make? Because as a hotel, they do a 20% service charge. So they took every vendor cost and marked it up 20%. So out of every package, about 15,000 of it. So they were making 3,000 to 5,000 per wedding times 150 wedding. And he was like, do I have to give you a bonus now? I was like, heck yeah, you do. Like, he's like, I can't believe we made that much money off of just the vendors that we were already sending the business to.
That's incredible.
It's a lot of work. So don't hear me when I say this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the venue that's like, I don't want to be hands-on. I want to be hands-off. I just want them to come in, book, and go do their things. Do that. But when you're ready at that point to up level and to look for more revenue and to really kind of control the environment in a way that you are going to guarantee a 5-star review every single time. We all know, right? The venue gets blamed. I don't care who. If the DJ sucks, it's the venue's fault. And you're like, I didn't even know him. They found him on Craigslist. I've never even heard of them before. It's our fault anyway, so we might as well make money off of it.
Totally. And have more control over what people are perceiving as our product.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Perception versus the reality, 100%.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a tough question to kind of wrap this up, because you used a hotel as an example. And I think we probably have a lot of privately owned venues listening to this show. We've got a lot of...
It was a family-owned hotel, though. So it actually was not corporate.
Sweet.
Yes, it was a hotel. But yeah, you're talking privately owned, no food and beverage.
And you know where I'm going with this probably.
Yeah.
So there are in every market smaller and larger management companies, right? Who come along and say, and there's certainly larger ones. There's a couple of larger ones across the country at different places, and they include F&B. They include the whole thing. They have it set up. You're paying a 20 to 25, close to even 30% in some cases, service fee on top of everything. There's a site fee. There's a per person F&B cost on both sides. You pick your packages. And I think probably the discussion or the sales pitch for the blank canvas mom and pop startup venue is you don't necessarily want to get married at that cookie cutter place where you're going to get all those same cookie cutter options. Yeah. But now you're a venue owner that's been saying that, but during your second, your third, your fourth year, you listen to this podcast, and you're like, crap, I want to...
I'm going to have to change my pitch.
I want to start including some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand how does that smaller venue, that one-off venue kind of compete against, how do they have a different sort of package offering that still includes some of the customization that they're really trying to give that is still a differentiator other than kind of a large big box wedding management company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the choices are probably one of the biggest differentiators because most of the big box don't give them choices options. They really, truly just, when they buy the package, they get assigned vendors. So I think the knowledge is important of knowing your competitors, knowing what's in your market, and knowing those ones you're up against of how they do it, like what's their process, and thinking, how can we position it differently? So even let's use floral, for example, because we didn't start including floral there, but we ended up adding it in because the couples were looking and was like, well, this is great, but how much my flower is going to cost? And I was like, oh God, floral's so hard. So we kind of figured out a dollar amount credit that we knew could cover 13 centerpieces, a decent amount of personals, a bride bouquet, some boutonnieres, or they could just use that dollar amount. If they only had bride and groom or 2 brides, they could still have the 2 bouquets. So, but that was like, it wasn't, the cakes were, it's a dollar amount for the cake. It's not, you have to choose cake 1, cake 2, or cake 3. So I think that's probably, it's making sure that the design functionality is still that you can choose your color of uplights and you can decide on if the venue, I tell every venue, if you don't own plastic chargers, you're an idiot. They're $1 and you can charge $1 every single time you use them. And every 3 years you throw them away and start over. Like you make a ton of money. So, but you can have gold or silver like making sure there's still choices as a part of it, that I think is probably one of the biggest differentiators of your big management companies because they can't have that much flexibility. Yeah. They can't have the availability to say, do you want this or this? Or like linens. We looked at the price. We rented them from an outside company. We didn't own them ourselves. Even as a hotel, we didn't do wedding linens because I wanted them to choose every color. Well, the cost in between what we were including from a poly cotton to a Lemoire, which is like, oh, Lemoire, satiny and shiny and whatever. The cost in between the two was $100. So we decided to build in the extra 100 and we would give them a choice of poly cotton, every color, or Lemoire if they wanted shiny fan. And they were like, oh, whereas everyone else in the all-inclusive only offered poly cotton. So really look through to see what's included in those competitors you're up against and see what do we do. If they're like, oh, they only have sparklers as an exit. Well, can you do sparklers, glow wands, bubbles? Like, can you just have all of the stuff? And so that, again, even there, they're getting choices.
Totally. I love that you said make it more custom. There's still a way. What you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is there's still a way to go very customized, yet still all-inclusive, where you can give that more personalized feel that a larger kind of big box company can't. And there is a flavor for everyone. We need to say that. For the larger companies, like some people are just like, hey, where do I write my $25,000 check? I'm trying to get married quick. Or I'm just, I don't want to worry about it at all. Yeah. But a lot of people are like, oh, this is my one day. I want to spend time on this. And so giving them some choices, while also not forcing them to become a project manager, I think is totally what we're talking about today.
And we have somebody in our market. I mean, I'll tell a million times over, he's a freaking genius. He owned a bartending company and he kept meeting with venues who were like, I don't want to do this. Like we got into this. This is way too much. So he went to all of his vendors and he's like, I'm going to build the package. So he came in, he's a bar guy who turned into a management company who now is managing like, I don't know, 10 or 12 venues in our market. And he does customize it for every venue. They're not all the same with all the same vendors because this one's a barn, this one's all outside, this one's a ball. Like he kind of matches too, but I'll tell you, I mean, I can feed him almost a lead a week of a venue who calls me and is like, I think I'm over it. I either want to sell it. And I'm like, wait, before you do that, if I could figure out a company that could get you the same $8,000 rental and you could go hands off, would you do it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, go talk to Bruce. Like, so I think that also might be an opportunity, maybe not the big boy management company, but maybe you've got a planner that you love and you love working with. And you're like, hey, have you ever thought about building an all-inclusive and we'll sell it? And the planner's responsible for managing all of that. I mean, if you're like, I really don't want to do this, but I want the money that comes from it. I mean, maybe that's, or I want the sellability, meaning I'm losing business to venues that are all inclusive, then maybe it's you don't have to do it, but you find somebody else who, has it or can do it for you.
And then at that point, you're only selling the space, and then you're passing it off immediately and they're handling the whole thing white glove. Yeah, totally. That makes so much sense. Shannon, thank you for coming on today. This was so much fun, such an engaging discussion about vendors and venues and how to put it all together and do all the things. I loved it. If people want to see you speak, if they want to check you out online, if they want to do any of that, where are they headed? Where should they go?
So you can pretty much just Google Shannon Tarrant and find me in all the places. I have a website, shannontarrant.com. It's the same name on Facebook, Instagram, everything. I'm in all the places. I try to speak everywhere I possibly can get my hands on. So pretty much you can always expect me to be a TSC cater source, which isn't always the most popular in terms of venues. But if you do catering at your venue, you should definitely, it's called the Special Event and Cater Source. It's in February of next year. Wedding MBA is kind of my second home. Love being there. Excited. I'm speaking in the venue track this year specifically about how to choose vendors that give back so that you as a venue aren't the one only giving. You can kind of take back. But yeah, I speak all over. I do in-person coaching, a lot of online stuff, and just really venues are my passion. And so being able to look at things and help walk them through just differentiating themselves and how to make more profit, how to price for profit. It's kind of my world. So you can find me in all the places, Instagram, Facebook. I'll be TikToking soon, but not yet. Soon. It's coming soon.
I love it. Shannon, thank you for being on the show today. It was awesome having you on the Venue RX, and we'll talk soon.
Can't wait.
Bye.